So we're basically printing money at the moment. The plans we put in place over the last couple of seasons are now paying off in droves, especially financially. Oh, and we've signed a player who I genuinely believe is a future Ballon d'Or winner, probably before he's like 25. Now, normally, this is the part in one of these videos where I tell you that we've got a Hungarian side in a European final for the X amount of seasons, and you should come over and check that out after you've watched the video. But today, sadly, is not that day. What we do, however, have is the largest transfer budget we've ever worked with in this save, over £100 million. So come on over and watch us try and spend that. The VODs of all the streams can, of course, be found on the second channel, linked in the description. They go up the day after every stream. But for now, Season 16 of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was always going to be a hiding to nothing. We pretty much knew that no matter what we did this season, barring an absolute miracle and every Hungarian team wins everything, we were probably going to fall as far as 7th in the coefficients. But we knew that that could hopefully become a slingshot for us to push our way all the way up to the top and hopefully get back into the top 5, 4, and potentially even 3 in the next few seasons. But that is for later, because let's talk transfers, because there have been some massive outs and also, as I mentioned, some massive ins. But let's just start with the outs first, shall we? The first of whom was Guillermo Navarro, not a player I would have particularly chosen to get rid of if we had to. However, he'd kicked up so much of a fuss about leaving that it essentially put us in a position where we had to sell him. It's unfortunate because I actually really like him as a player, but at 29 we have other players coming through that I felt could fit the mold quite well and were just going to cost us less harm, basically. So in the end, a January move to Barcelona for £49 million. The next out is Diego Hidalgo, a player that we only brought in, I think it was a season and a half to 2 seasons ago from Boca Juniors for £16 million. Now, he was part of our plan where the idea was we would find players that looked to be undervalued at their current clubs, bring them in, bump their values up, and then move them on. And this is exactly what we've done with Diego. £25 million to Aston Villa. Now, it's only a £9 million profit, but with the sort of signings we tend to make, is actually probably 2 or 3 young loan farm signings, possibly even more, honestly. So it's just really nice to be able to do that for a player that wasn't really playing that often, and to get a nice £9 million profit is just exactly what we needed. Even more down that route was Skinnerinho, or Liam Skinner as he's otherwise known, a player we signed from Liverpool for £1.1 million. He did a solid couple of seasons as a backup right back for us before being sold to Arsenal for £18.75 million. It's the Joe Medinger situation all over again. That English tax is very, very nice for selling those players on. A nice healthy £17 million profit on players like Skinnerinho. And we knew that because of our high wage budget, which has been controlled a little bit more this season, that bringing in these players on the cheap, especially English players, and then trying to flip them was going to be a great way for us to make some money. And this is what we've been doing fantastically this year, just printing money, essentially. Next up was Leandro Mendes, who I think is a player I only signed for us last season, probably showed you in the last video, for I think £3 million, 3.2, might have been 4. So he moves over to Al Jarafa over in, I think that's in Qatar, for £11.75 million. Had really no ideas to sell him, but then we got a random bid, and it was, what, 3 or 4 times what we'd already paid for him very recently. Figured it was an absolute no-brainer to once again grab another sort of £7-8 million profit. And that's just, they add up if you do that enough. Then there was another of the players that we brought in specifically with the purpose of flipping 2 seasons ago. Chris Smith joined us on a free from Manchester United, sold him to Leeds for £8.25 million in the January transfer window as well. In addition to those moves, you can also see on screen some other outs that happened. Almost all of these were to other Hungarian sides. So De Bruyne, Awono, Barwick went to Milan for £2 million, but it has a 50% of next sale fee clause, which is lovely. Sanchez in there as well, Valenzuela, Polden, Pedersen, all these guys were sold on the cheap to other Hungarian sides. They may look expensive, but this is actually, they offered us twice that, and I normally offer them a half price deal on some of these players that they want. And it's just, yeah, just getting those guys out of the club to actually permanent deals in Hungary is massive when you consider how good some of these guys are. But now let's talk about the ins, because this is where things get very interesting. The first signing of the summer, of course, was Mladen Gašić. I showed you guys him in the previous one because we'd already talked about the saga of how he will sign for us, so I won't go into him too much. Needless to say, he's an absolutely monstrous goalkeeper, and we just knew that he was going to be an absolute Donny for us. Also just occurred to me that technically this happened in the previous season. That means, of course, our starting goalkeeper, Junior Portilla, was sold to PSG for £58 million. Now, between the two of them, they're very, very evenly matched. I just liked a couple of the things a bit more about Gašić, as well as the fact that we saw the mistakes Portilla was making. Gašić so far this season has been absolutely perfect. I've not seen a single error from him. He's looked fantastic. So we got £58 million for Portilla, and we're able to sign Gašić for £10 million, who for me was arguably better. So as another gain of like £50 million for Portilla, who literally cost us nothing. Next, of course, is one of the free transfers that I showed you last season was joining us. This is Max Bainbridge, 12 goals, 8 assists this season. Really like him. Who's he wanted by? Oh, that's new. Wait, hang on, that just disappeared. Oh no, it's there. That's very nice. Obviously, he was one of the players that the plan was bring them in, flip them, and have a bloody happy time. He came in on a free from Leeds. If we could get Manchester City to pay us somewhere around his value of 25 to 30 million in one season to make 30 million pounds on a 31-year-old, that would be stonks of the highest order. Another player we brought in with the exact same aims was Sam Ingram, who of course part of that Liverpool team that knocked us out of the Champions League last year. He, however, has just astonished me this season. He has been the unsung hero. I don't even think the regular chatters will realise how good he's been this year. I was looking at his stats after stream and I realised that he has been carrying us in a little bit of places. He's got 20 goals this season from attacking midfield and 11 assists. Now, a lot of that's obviously playing in the league with 14 and 4 there, and has actually become a real fixture in our first team given some of the tactical tweaks we've made, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Then we dropped £6 million on Jose Carlos, a central midfielder who just looked to be the business, and you can see from his valuation now that he very much clearly is that. He's been out on loan at Honved as they've won the second tier title this season to promote themselves back to the top flight, and he was a great part of that. Next, a massive misstep. Honestly, this was a signing that I regret horrendously. Fabio Luis, 10.25 million. The idea was basically getting to the later part of the window, and we were genuinely, after selling Skinner, looking a little bit light for both left and right back and needing some players that could just sort of cover those roles. I couldn't find anybody that really suited that until I saw Luis. £10 million is a massive overpayment though. However, if we could flip him off to Ajax now for around about the same amount of money, I would absolutely take that. Maybe get a little clause in there as well, because we're now looking much better in those positions. Next up, there's Dick. That is his actual name. It's actually, well, I mean, I know it's Schwarz, but we were calling him Dick Sauce because, of course, we were. He also threw up this wonderful news article. That might be my favourite news bot. Budapest dismissed Dick speculation. On the topic of fun names, Wonderboy Malloy. Again, same kind of story. It's immature in a way, but at the same time, I like signing players because they have fun names. Is that so wrong? Which brings us to the greatest signing of all time. This is Cock Ringerling. I was not expecting this to actually be a player in the game. Cock Ringerling. I realise this is probably a totally normal Dutch name, but that might be one of the best names I've ever seen. That's just his name. Cock Ringerling. And yes, you can see it's his actual name. Of course, no nicknames, none of that silly nonsense. We could not bloody believe our eyes. Someone spotted him in a scout report, or rather in like some, I think it was Ajax's youth team, and we were actually able to sign him. And the thing is, he's actually done well this season. 12 goals for Zalagaseg. Another free transfer here in Hernan Ramos from Vélez. Again, one of these sort of Hidalgo type signings, except this guy is completely free. Hope we can maybe flip him for 10, 15 million in like a season, although that could be quite tough given that he's 30, but still had to be done. We also brought back to the club João Virginia. You may remember him, of course, from his time as an absolute god here for many, many years. In fact, he was here at the club for like 7 years. I went to Al Hilal for 7 seasons. He then came back, finished off the season as our backup goalkeeper, and now he's decided to become an under-19s goalkeeping coach, and he is freaking awful, but that's fine. We'll make him better. But I've saved the very best till last here. The next two signings you're about to see are some of my favourite possibly in this entire save. The first one is one that came out of nowhere. The second one is the future Ballon d'Or winner I mentioned earlier in the video. So first up, we have Oliveira. He's a 28-year-old Brazilian international goalkeeper that we picked up for £9.5 million for Fluminense. I couldn't believe that he was available. He just randomly showed up in a scout report. I didn't even find this guy, but I saw at the time he was actually 4-star. Great reflexes, great one-on-ones, great aerial reach, and he, not only that, was willing to come in on a backup contract. He's played like a decent amount this season for us as well in some games too, and I think he's absolutely stunning. So to have him as the backup to Gacic, we now have an absolutely insane goalkeeping duo of these two, and I could not be prouder. But now we come to possibly, might even be our most expensive signing of all time thus far, but I'll tell you what, he's bloody worth it. This is he, the monster himself, Sem van Dam. He's a 19-year-old who we signed from Antwerp for £24.5 million. Now, you know already that I have a thing about signing overpriced Belgians. It's happened several times in this save. Look at his goal return this year. He's actually ended up playing a lot of matches, as you can see. 27 starts, 24 goals, and 16 assists. And you'll note, considering he doesn't play in any other positions, he got 16 assists playing as a striker in this team. He only ever played up front, as you can see. He has been on a tear this season. The fact that he's already 3-star current ability, and at times has actually gone up as high as 4-star current ability. Obviously, it fluctuates based on form, and you can see that he has just dropped off a little bit. You can see there that he was 4 stars briefly. It is utterly mad. He's not even the quickest, but his acceleration is fire. He's got great temp poles of dribbling, finishing, first touch. His composure is fantastic. Off the ball is amazing. He's got wonderful technique. He's good on both feet. He is just the perfect striker for the system that we play. I just couldn't believe how good he's become this season. I thought he'd sort of slip in like Milovanovic or Blazajurin, those guys who are very, very good, have the potential, but when they were actually put in our team, were never quite able to perform at the highest level yet because they're still very young, whereas Van Dam has just grabbed it with open arms. I mean, it might be Van Dam, it might be Zorro, we just don't know. But that's enough of that. Let's just quickly take a little look into tactics before we show you the league and the other good stuff, because tactics are a bit of a weird one for us this season. So obviously we have our basic tactic that we use most of the time in the Champions League, and in most of the time in the Champions League, especially in home games. However, this year we actually experimented with a secondary tactic for the Champions League in away matches to try and experiment, because we noticed that when we tried playing this in the league, it was very tight, but it didn't create a lot. But what it did do was be ruthless on the counter-attack. Problem was, most of the time it's hard to play on the counter-attack when you're against teams that you're much, much better than. However, in Europe, I was speaking even very fast even for me there. I do apologize. It's just my natural speaking voice. What can I do? In Europe, we figured we might give it a go. So we've been using the fortress for that. However, as we often do in these situations when the league is running down towards the end, we like to try stuff. One of the things we tried this season was this. And you're thinking to yourself, that is a monstrosity. And whilst you are correct, I think there's actually something here. Because this system, over the 5 games or 6 games that we've played it, has never failed to get more than less than 12 shots on target in a match. And that is ridiculous. One of them had 20 shots on target. Something about this system and the style of play, there's always a passing option on. Everyone's always diagonal to each other, so it has this weird situation where there's never really... It's very hard for your opponent to intercept passes with this system. And it just seems to do the trick. It's not going to work in the Champions League probably, but my God, does it play some gorgeous football. Right, to the league. Obviously, we've won the league. Not a huge surprise there. Plus 84 goal difference. Obviously, we don't win it by as much as we used to. We're not getting like the mid 90 points like we were before. The domination just simply isn't possible with us rotating the squad. Particularly as well when we're playing tactics like that and like the calzone of love from last season, you know? And Budapest failed to make Europe this season. This is the guys that we had all of our hopes on, and this year they come 7th with only 44 points. A massive drop-off for them. They just couldn't hack it. Several managers they've been through this year after losing Fabio Grosso to the Italian job. It's not great. They were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off, and instead they've come 7th. But of course we only have 6 teams in Europe next year, which means less dilation and hopefully... Dilation? No, not dilation. Dilution. I don't know how that would work in here. Right then, that's that stuff out of the way. It's all good, but now it's time to talk about the main thing in these videos, and that is, of course, Europe. So, naturally, we went into the group stages, and this year, something felt a little bit different. First up, we went away to Milan, got ourselves a fantastic result in terms of the on-paper performance. Lacked a few goals, but, you know, sometimes that goes around, comes around. Darla with the winning goal for us, got the win. They had an early red card, which really helped. Then we hosted Porto, and things were starting to look a little bit dodgy in this game. Texi gave us the lead before Dennis Osokin put them in front after 66 minutes. And, well, you can see from the flow of the game that would have been very irritating, as at the time that was their only 2 shots on target. Luckily, Bobby Tree came off the bench 74th minute to equalise, and then in the 91st put ourselves in front, a 3-2 victory. Again, 2 hard-fought wins where we really should have won by more and would have been very unlucky not to take points, but that really is just the story of this season in many ways. Things got a lot easier though as we then faced Tottenham up next, and Bobby Tree really hit the ground running then. Another hat-trick for him. Started off the season on fire. To this point, we basically decided that Bobby actually was going to get the starting role. It was this performance off the bench in the last game that won in the starting role for this game, which he took with open arms for a huge result. Now, we'd actually moved Castillo out wide at this point, and he was starting to get some more game time off the wings, and, well, you'll see from his stats later that it's worked for him, as we then travelled away to Sevilla, who we'd humped before. No problem there again. LMS, Silva, Velasquez, and Ballon giving us a huge win as we were 4 for 4 in the Champions League and looking on fire, which showed absolutely no signs of slowing down as we travelled to France to see Ron. And, well, again, should have had more goals in this one, but it is what it is. At least we were getting the wins. Michel Susini got one back for them, but it was too late, as Silva and Bobby Tree had scored for them to give us a 2-1 victory, 5 out of 5. As next, we went away to Liverpool at Anfield, and these are the kind of performances you dream of, honestly. An own goal put us behind because we thought, oh, not again, and it was almost identical to one of the own goals we'd scored before. It is what it is. But then, Jose Luis Castillo in the 23rd minute gave us an equaliser, which was nice, and this was playing off the left-hand side, bear in mind, with Bobby Tree through the middle. Scored the equaliser, and we thought, cool. Now, at this point, the game was very, very even. We'd done sod all, really. Neither had they. And in the second half, we decided to move to the fortress system just to try and defend the point and get away with it, because we just know how these things can be. And then we actually started playing very well in the second half. Won a penalty with that system, as it does seem to draw a lot of fouls, and Castillo was able to dispatch to give us our 6th win in the Champions League in the same season, and that officially put us top by clear points. And boy, did we show that off. Hammering Wolfsburg 4-0, albeit actually finally overperformed our XG. Van Dam with a goal, Patrice in there, Castillo and Bainbridge as well. I think this might be Van Dam's first show in Europe, as this was just after Christmas, and he'd really proved himself. We had no choice due to injuries to start him, and he played well. And then to continue that, things got even better, as a 4-0 hammering of Napoli, with one from Tex-Mex, and then a hat-trick from Van Dam in the Champions League. He was on a different level of class here. He got these 2 games due to Bobby Tree having a 9-week injury, and obviously we were happy to play Castillo off the left in in that. As you can see, another 2 assists for him. And Van Dam just took the mantle. And this was when he became our first choice striker, basically. Doing this in Europe, it did it all. What a result. And that, of course, means 8 wins out of 8. We won every single group stage game for the first time ever, which did this to us. I mean, look at that. 4 goals conceded, 8 wins out of 8, 24 points, top of the entire bloody group. Absolutely monstrous season from us there. But then you'll look a little bit further down, but you won't have to look too far down to see 13th place Kishvarda. Their manager has got them playing stunning stuff, and they've now suddenly become the second team in Hungary. They beat Fenerbahce, Stade Rennais, Benfica away, and Napoli by 4 goals to 1. They were flying. Luckily, Budapest did still manage to at least qualify out of the Champions League by beating Fenerbahce, Napoli, and Maccabi Haifa 5-0. They got their wins, got 10 points, came 22nd, and did at least qualify for the knockouts. So then that, of course, led to the knockouts. Now, we obviously got a bye through the next round at that point. We'll talk about what happened to Kishvarda and Budapest in a minute, but we drew Chelsea. 11th place Chelsea was our reward. There were some much easier draws we could have had, but it is what it is. But during that first leg at Stamford Bridge, we decided, away from home, let's try the fortress out and see if it works. I guess you could say that it did. Playing that strikerless system away at Chelsea, Tex-Mex scored a brace in the first 20 minutes, Silva scored, Ingram added a 4th, and we absolutely battered them whilst playing on the counter-attack, basically. You'll see 48% possession. It actually got more towards the end of the game. We were just playing on the break over and over and over, and Chelsea just could not handle us with those ruthless counter-attacks. We then reverted back to our normal tactic for the home game, 1 for Tex-Mex, 1 for Bobby Tree. There was a few rotations, a little bit for this game as well, as some players were substituted early, as we beat Chelsea 6-0 to cruise through. And at this stage, you're thinking, okay, this is looking very good. We've won 10 out of 10 in the Champions League so far this season and are absolutely killing it. And then we were drawn against Barcelona in the next round, and we thought, you know what? Barcelona aren't sensationally good. They're a good side, and we had just sold Navarro to them, but I felt that we could kind of take on anyone at this point. Now, if you recall the last time we played Barca, all manner of nonsense, finally beat them on penalties. Well, prepare yourself. First leg at home against Barcelona. Yes, Thibaut Robinet with the winning goal. 1-0. It was the only highlight that we actually saw from Barca in the entire game. We had 23 shots, hit the target 5 times, hit the woodwork 3 times, but it was actually more like 5 because for some reason ones from corners don't seem to count most of the time for whatever reason. 2.54 XG, didn't score a single goal. I could not believe it. It was just one of those days when you can just tell that it's not going to go your way. Yeah, that didn't work out either. They went in front through Gurkan San. We then got a goal back through Van Dam after we'd switched to the 5-star Trek for the second half. But it wasn't enough. We were the better side in both games, and we lost 2-1. It's just football sometimes. But Budapest's reward for finishing 22nd, which wasn't a huge achievement, was Juventus, but massively, they won the home game. They actually managed to beat them, so they were still able to do this while struggling in the league. Kishvarda, on the other hand, got, obviously as a result of coming 13th, a very plum draw against Red Bull Salzburg, and bugger me did they make advantage of it. 3-0 victory, with 2 for Fruta, 1 for Angulo, 3-0. I mean, insane. But you will see that Juventus beat Budapest 4-0. And, well, the hopes of them going through any further was dashed. But, I mean, Kishvarda are in a great spot, which they took advantage of with another goal for Fruta. So they actually won both legs to go through to the round of 16 in the Champions League. And they drew Porto. And we thought, you know what? That's the one winnable side. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case, as they lost 3-1 at home. Baptiste Berger got them back into it, but Fernando, Sheldrup, and Hadbrun with the goals for Porto were just, it just wasn't enough, sadly. Sadly, they went down 2-1 in Porto as well. Antoine Merle getting them a goal back in between, but it wasn't enough. A 5-2 aggregate exit. But at least we're seeing Hungarian sides get into that round of 16 now. And this went surprisingly well for some of the teams in there. You'll see Haladash really showing their quality. Will be in the Champions League next year and will deserve it too. They came 5th in the Europa League. 5 wins on the board. You'll also note Debrecen, though, coming 13th in there too. Solid job, no big deal. Sadly, though, Kecskmet weren't quite good enough. They came 28th, and the biggest problem for them, they got some results against Trabzonspor and Olimpia Ljubljana late on. It was these defeats. They lost to Valencia and Malmö, which kind of sucks, but they also lost at home to Olympiacos and Utrecht, and those are results that you'd expect them to at least get something from. The key thing is Debrecen got themselves, in theory, a guaranteed better draw, and Haladash got a bye. Except Debrecen then drew Lazio and lost only 1-0 in the away game, and we thought, you know what, that's a chance. They can win the home game, hopefully, and go on from there. Except that's exactly what they did. Sadly, it wasn't enough, as Lazio were able to win on penalty. Andras Puskas's goal was not enough, but that then, of course, led Haladash, who'd come 5th, remember, to get their draw, and they drew bloody Newcastle. That was their reward for coming 5th, was Newcastle, and you know that when you draw Newcastle, it doesn't matter how well they've done in the league phase, they're still probably going to beat you. But it was only 1-0, and we thought, you know what, there's a chance. Except that was then wiped away as well. Steven Solis gave them the lead, but Harvey Vale equalised for Newcastle, and all of a sudden, after all that optimism, both of them were out really, really quickly with just ridiculously tough draws, which left us with Ferencváros in the Conference League. And honestly, they let us down. They came 14th, which is still qualification, still top half, but honestly, they beat Metalat, they beat Brieg, they beat Stjarnan, but they took draws with Skendia, Skendia of North Macedonia. Said 27th place Skendia. They took a draw with Hajduk Split, who actually are a good side, and they lost against Dynamo Kiev. They were at home as well. I would have expected better from them out of that, given how well other teams have done and how good they're in theory supposed to be. Luckily, their draw for the next round was Rapid Bucharest, and they did actually hammer them 3-0 away from home to cruise through to the next round, followed by another 3-0 victory to make it 6-0 on aggregate. And I thought, okay, maybe there actually is something here if they could just get the right pathway and avoid one of the massive teams. Of course, that's exactly not what happened as they faced Leeds United. Durin did get a goal for them in the home leg, but they lost 2-1. Then in the second leg, they actually got a draw at Ellen Rowe with Sanchez scoring a late one, but it wasn't enough, and they all went out. Not a single Hungarian side this season progressed past the quarter-final of any European competition, despite having a record number of points at the end of the group stages in terms of coefficient. Because as you'll see, that ended up with us having 17 points on the coefficient this year. We had 14.8 after the group stages, which is the most we've ever had at this stage. It was outrageous. Italy, though, having an absolutely appalling season, which could really help us a few years down the line, as that is something they're going to be living down for a while. Even we didn't have a 13 the first season that we got 7 teams in Europe. So that, I think, is what could potentially allow us to catch Italy in a few years. That does slip us to 7th this season, because Germany, obviously, having lost a few things lately, had a great year, wasn't likely. Also, they gained 4 points on us. They were all gaining points on us this year because we were losing that 20-point season. Because as much as we have now slipped down to 7th in the coefficients, we knew that that would happen at some point, because what always happens is you go up, the dilution hits you hard, and then you slide. But then you adapt. And you'll note that we really were starting to adapt. This year was still a solid year. Despite all of that going wrong, it was the second best year we've had with 7 teams in Europe. And that really does say something. Because even at a basic level where we say we get the exact same number of points than them next season, look how much we gain. 3 points here, 3 points here, none there. But then the next year, it gets ridiculous. It's like 3 points there, 4 points there, albeit only 2 there, 6 there. We're going to gain huge amounts of points on these teams over the coming season, especially as we'll also have an opportunity to get more points, probably, because we'll have better teams in worse competitions because of the slight thing, and the dilution will be lower, meaning that our wins will be worth more. The last time I didn't even talk about the youth intake because there was sod all in it. This time I am going to talk about it, but only because it's somehow even worse. As it happens, actually, they've actually improved slightly. Originally, we had a half-star youth intake. I didn't even know you could get those, but we did. And bear in mind, they're actually not good. The players are not good. I'm not even going to go into it. They're just not good. But as a result of that, we went out and hired the best youth intake man in the game. If he can't bring us some good youth intakes over the next couple of seasons, like over the next 5 years before he retires, then I really don't know what we're going to do. On the team stats, I mean, what a season it's been. Jose Luis Castillo, 51 goal contributions, 30 goals, 21 assists. He's just an absolute monster, and he's performed better when he's been played out wide. He's been so damn good this season. Van Dam, though, 24 goals. Bobby Tree, 22. Is still a good record for him, I agree. There is a chance that we could lose Bobby in this window. I would be potentially tempted to sell if we got a massive bid from one of the big European sides of like over 100 million. I potentially would cash in on Bobby Tree at that point and allow a bit more room in the team for the likes of Milovanovic and Blaz Durin to come back in recent years. Silva as well, though, 23 assists, 38 goal contributions, insane. Bainbridge did well. Tex-Mex was more of an assister this season. Still got 30 goal contributions with that 19 assist year. He's still an absolute monster as well. You love to see it. To the loan farm, we're at negative 126 loans at the moment, so that's 130 in total as a result of all those players leaving on permanent transfers. Now, interesting times with this. You'll see here that a lot of our loans go through to 2040. So that trick we tried, it actually does work. These are 2040, these are 2039, but these are from last season. For some reason, and I do not know why, but this does work now, and we've got the hard data to prove it. If you extend the loan, like you right click on the player and you go into here and go propose loan extension. Obviously it's not here for this because it's already done. If you do that on the 2nd of June, when the loans are expiring on the 30th of June, which is when they mostly expire for most European leagues. If you do that, or it might just be in Hungary, I don't know. If you do that on the 2nd of June, with the first action of that day, specifically, when you come to get the thing in your inbox about the loan, it will highlight it and it will say end of next season, and end of season will be grayed out. But if you do that later in the day, it will say end of season. Don't know why. Weird thing is, though, no matter which one of those you choose, it still treats it as a double season loan. And as long as you do it on the 2nd of June, not the 3rd of June, haven't tried it with the 1st of June, but on the 2nd of June, it does a 2-season loan. Boya with 41, Genius with 40. Zhivkovic has still been godlike for Haladash this season as well. 26 for him. I mean, look at the ability. We've got some 3.5-star players. Mihal as well. This guy's on loan. This guy's on loan. And obviously Jurin as well with 15 goals there too. The loan farm is just absolutely killing it. I like looking at the progress bar too to sort of see who's actually really stepping it up. People like Mikros coming out of nowhere there to be quite good. And Radovanovic, who, you know what, probably would get in our team now. And he's still only 20. I know some people said they wanted more information about the loan farm, but I don't really know what more I can add. If you are interested in how to set these up, I have a whole video about this called like why loans are broken or something, or why you can never get your players out on loan. That's where I would most of this stuff is in there, except for obviously the 2-year loan thing, which is brand new. Speaking fast again, even for myself. So finances, obviously the thing you're all about now. 250 mil in the bank. We have made 250 million. Well, we haven't actually. Last season, we made 132 million pounds in profit. That's the kind of years that we're on for, and I can only see this going up now. Now, obviously, our budget technically says 63 million there. It's actually higher than that. It's just because we've already spent on a few players that you'll see coming in next time around. So that is the current situation. The aims for this season are, as I just said, basically, we've only got 6 teams in Europe. We want to have the maximum amount of points possible. I want to see a minimum of 19 points from our Champions League, or sorry, from our football this season to really start to get us back on track and start building our way back up again. Even if we have to finish 7th for 2 straight seasons, that could actually help us potentially, as it will give us a 3rd season of the dilution. That could actually be the springboard we need to maybe get 2nd. But even if we move up 1, I'm still happy with that. So if you've enjoyed this, drop a like. That'd be gorgeous. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. That'd be gorgeous too. Thank you everyone that came over from the video I did with Tom. That was awesome. We've got some more stuff coming up soon next week. Worry not. I'll see you guys over on stream. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.